Okay. So, this is the part 3 or pseudo part 3, examining the Iran-Iraq war. Specifically, I got more clarification about what I was actually, asked to look at when it comes to specifics between these. And one of the things that Michael wanted kind of an analysis or a look at was specifically Israeli involvement with funding and support during the war, right? Because in the actual video that we reacted to, there were a couple jabs taken. One was about the Iran-Contra deal, saying, oh, wow, sometimes terrorism works and blah, 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 coming from the Reagan administration. And the other one was directly in reference to Israeli support of Iran during the Iraq-Iran war, saying, it's crazy to think that this is something that would happen. And I think a lot of that is just framed from the modern lens, where Iraq has been, it is entirely different from what it was in the 1980s. Saddam Hussein obviously has been dead for over, wow, that's crazy, 20 years now. Yeah, he's been dead. We saw the fall of Hussein, the rise and fall of different militant groups, the rise and fall of ISIS and ISIL in Iraq specifically. And so from in currently, Iran has been in the news a lot, right? So obviously there were the strikes, joint strikes between the United States and Israel against Iran, specifically targeting higher up military officers as well as nuclear infrastructure. Obviously that was a big deal. And then currently the revolution that's going on / is being subjugated. The last numbers that I saw, recording this as of the 29th of January, 2026, the last numbers that I saw were at least between 20,000 and 25,000 killed protesters by a brutal, evil, dictatorial, extremist regime. And who knows what the real number is. There's always a chance that it's less than the reported number. I personally would imagine that it is, I don't know. I think it's probably 3 to 5 times the number, or it will be by the end, or the stalemate or resolution or whatever's gonna halt the current unrest that's happening in Iran. So when we look at it from a modern viewpoint and we think of Iraq as currently like a non-entity, but we look at Iran as, oh my God, they've been in the news, it's been a big deal, they had nukes, they're crazy enough to use them, all of that. It's kind of wild to think that in this war between these two states, Israel, of all people, would have supplied aid to Iran. Would have supplied aid to Iran, right? Especially given, let me look. Comparison to other conflicts. Oh, foreign aid. There you go. Especially given the fact that the Ayatollah had just recently taken over the previous year, the revolution taking place in like 1978, 1979, which was, a year and change before the war began in 1980 with Iraq invading. So post-revolutionary Iran is definitely not a friend of the West, and definitely is, arguably an existential threat to Israel. So why the hell would they want to support Iran over Iraq? So, trying to get into specifics, let's see if we can aid to both countries, U.S., Soviet Union, supplying both sides, which is, kind of typical. Iraq fucked up. Use of chemical weapon. Here, let me just Google search Israel. So, the Iran-Iraq War. Genocidal proportions. Ephraim Karsh. Oh, that's fun that he was going in here. So I don't see. Oh, here we go. Ha! It's another complete different thing. So, if you don't know geography, there's Israel. Not Palestine, that's Israel. And then here's Iran, right? So they gave arms deals was kind of the biggest thing because, even the United States uses a lot of guidance systems and software, like chip manufacturing software and guidance systems, basically for military purposes, just because Israel is very advanced. They're groundbreaking in a way. They're kind of the definition of being, forged in fire, right? Where they are surrounded on all sides by people who want to kill them. And, that really boils down to why they, in a conflict between Iraq and Iran, they would support Iran over Iraq, right? So Michael, when he was giving me, kind of his input and specifically just what he wanted me to talk about, he really wanted to emphasize that there's a very logical reason, which I agree with, with why they would do that. It's because, the most obvious example is geographical proximity, right? It is much easier for Iraq to physically invade or impede Israel than it would be for Iran. And so the enemy of your enemy is your friend, right? Where, if you look at all of the area between Israel and Iran as, separate sovereign entities, then you have buffer states between Israel and Iran. And because Iran is predominantly Persian versus Arab and Shia versus Sunni, there's a lot of intersectionality with conflict between Iran and neighboring states of Israel and Iran, right? Like all the states in between them. So, because, there's everything from Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, technically I guess you could argue Turkey if you went up and around it. It doesn't necessarily make sense. Or, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and you're just like, yeah, they're not neutral to either party, right? They don't necessarily like Israel and they don't necessarily like Iran. So when you look, if you're an Israeli and you're looking at the cost-benefit analysis of supporting either side during that war, you would look at, if we support Iran and it weakens Iraq, Iraq are, they are significantly closer. They have ease of access. They have more similarities with our neighbors that would, potentially allow, either mutual defense pacts, mutual defense assurances, allow, training exercises, joint military operations, like that sort of thing. Is much more likely to happen between Iraq and its neighbors than Iran. So, the enemy of your enemy is your friend, and weakening the enemy who is closer to you, has more access to you, makes a lot of sense from a, just a logical, rational, neoliberal perspective, with real politics zero-sum game, where you're like, no, like for every point percentage that Iraq drops in terms of military efficacy, or even economy, that arguably benefits Israel, right? And when you pick, you can pick different enemies, you can choose to support one side or the other, but when there's a homogenous body like Iran, it is naturally constrained, right, by its neighbors, versus Iraq. So in the previous video, I talked about the Ba'athist Party and kind of what they, what they espoused, right? What their planks were, politically speaking. And, one of the most foundational aspects of that was the concept of Pan-Arabism, right? And so with Pan-Arabism, so it looks weird because it's shaded in, but if you look at a map of the Arab world, right, you've got everything from, oh my God, West Sahara, right? The fuck is that? It's not Mali. Mali's down. I need to brush up on geography. But anyway, you're talking about Morocco, you're talking about Libya, you're talking about Egypt, you're talking about, all of these supra-Saharan African and Middle Eastern states, right? So Oman, Yemen, Eritrea, Somalia, LOL. Noticeably right here, you notice that little chunk of land right there, not Arab. So when you're looking at Iran versus Iraq, well, Iraq just has to go straight through Jordan or Syria, and boom, they're there, right? And the concept of Pan-Arabism, look at that, right? The idea of joining together, if you're looking at this from an Israeli standpoint, that's scary, right? That's worrying. That should be cause for maybe not direct alarm, but definitely wariness, right? And so when you have the Baathists and you have strong men in power that are hyper militant, they are completely ready and willing to use chemical weapons, brutal tactics, commit genocide, whatever they need to do in order to secure their goals. Iraq presents a much more immediate threat, right? And there's more of an immediate fear between these two states as opposed to Iran, right? Because Iran, Shia majority, here Sunni majority, quote unquote Shia government, but most of the Arab world is Sunni Muslim, so that naturally hampers Iran, and facilitates more danger from Iraq if you are Israeli. So you can't just look at it from a modern lens, right? Where the world today is so different from the world even just 10 years ago, right? And now at this point, we're talking about 40 years and change between the world today and the world during this period. Obviously that doesn't mean, supporting Iran doesn't mean, all of a sudden we're buddy-buddy. It's like, no, they have been repeatedly referred to as, the little Satan, and the USA being the big Satan. The Islamic regime in Iran is no friend of the West, period, full stop. And by extension also of Israel and just Jews in general, right? Just between extremism and militantism and everything else. So with, covert deals supplying weapons and parts and ammunition and even intelligence or training, which, I mean, you could argue that's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Even just if you have the correct intelligence, say everybody's in the fog of war and you're the only one who actually knows what's going on, that is worth its weight in gold in terms of tactical advantage, right? If you can see the enemy and their movements and they have no idea what you're doing, you already are on third base, right? Running into home to score. And that's been true all throughout history. So, I mean, even just during in World War II, right? Where the Ally reinvasion or reincursion into continental Europe, the reason that worked, right, Normandy Beach, the reason that worked was, obviously the just the sheer guts, determination, bravery of men, right? If you haven't seen Saving Private Ryan and you have not seen the Normandy Beach scene, that is widely regarded as one of the most historically accurate depictions of the chaos and just sheer brutal violence of storming Normandy, right? And landing and just trying to even get a foothold into fortified Europe, into continental Europe. So one of the reasons that the Allies were able to pull that off was because they were feeding misinformation and false intelligence to the Germans, right? They had inflatable tanks, they had inflatable boats, they had giant tarpaulins like canvas that they would stretch over empty fields that were painted on top to make it look like, oh, there's an airstrip, or oh, there are enemy planes, blah blah blah. And so when German spy planes flew over and they're collecting, intelligence, taking photos, and they just go, oh yeah, see, they haven't moved yet, they're still here, they're still there. Oh yeah, like that whole armored division is they're still north of London, they're not even thinking about landing yet. And then all of a sudden, some Hans is like reading that in a newspaper, like an intelligence debrief. He's, oh yeah, that's good. And then he looks out the window of his pillbox and he sees fucking the largest amphibious assault in human history still to this day, and goes, oh no. And you go, oh, 9. And yeah, that was a huge factor, right? And so for Israel to supply training, intelligence, ammunition, firearms. Like, that stuff is extremely, extremely valuable. Especially if you have technological advantages over other countries. You know, like when radar was first invented, and it's just like people couldn't figure out like how the hell do they keep finding our subs? How the hell do they keep knowing when we're flying sorties of our planes? Like, we don't get it. It's crazy. And it's like, no, it's because we have the technology. We have an advantage. Like the first people to have knocks, right? Or nods. Like having complete night vision and just being like, oh, this is like cheating. And imagine, right? Imagine fighting in the pitch black, and you're fighting against somebody who has not only like arms superiority, tactic superiority, but they can see you like it's broad day, and you can't even see your hand in front of your face, right? So, yeah, like it makes perfect sense, right? Because Iraq under the Hussein regime is so much more of an immediate threat, a far greater threat compared to Iran, especially because the revolution having just taken place, there's a new government that is ruling over Iran and the Iranian people, and you're just, they are still trying to consolidate power. They are still trying to bring all of the institutions and all of the government apparatus in Iran under control, right? It doesn't just happen overnight. And that's why, for example, in Venezuela, we yoink Maduro and we leave his cabinet in charge, and people are trying to criticize Trump or, the Americans over that. And it's like, no, we can't just ship the opposition party into Venezuela and just say, okay, cool, you're running the government now. That's not how it works. Governments are very, very inertia bound, right? Where you have great amounts of institutional knowledge from the people who have been in there serving as aides and cabinet members and advisors, working in different departments, doing all of this. And you can't just go in there and wipe everybody out, right? Because then nobody knows how anything works anymore. It's one of the reasons that all of the shitty Wall Street executives and bankers got away in 2007, 2008 scot-free, right? It's because the financial system in the stocks and just the mortgage and security bonds, or the bundling of debt, basically, with subprime mortgages, it was so complicated and so, to be honest, just so retarded that it's like, oh, we can't punish the people who benefited from this because they're the only people who actually know how the system works. That's what it is, right? And so that's when, even in political parties in the United States, you'll look and the politicians change, right? Not super often. Like, we have people who have been in there for 60 years, it seems like. But look behind them. The institutional power stays the same. It's the same aides, it's the same social media handlers, the same chair people for, whatever committee, whether it's the DNC or the RNC. It doesn't change that much. The people who are running, the faces, like, they get cycled out, but the underlying swamp, the underlying foundation remains the same. So from that perspective, Iran is not that great of a threat in the 1980s to Israel, right? because they're still trying to consolidate power. They're still focused on, achieving that hegemony over its own people, right? Making sure tomorrow's going to come for us no matter what. And then they can start looking beyond their own borders. So when, and from that same perspective, it makes sense why Saddam thought, oh, well, this is when I'm going to invade, right? Because he's trying to secure more coastline, get more industrial ports under his control. The province that he was taking, I forget the name of it, something Stan, Kazakhstan, kazoos. I think they make kazoos there, where it's majority Arab. So you go, oh, okay, that makes sense, right? It's checking a lot of boxes. And if you're thinking, well, the Ayatollah just took over, the Shah just left, they don't really have control over stuff, they haven't had a chance to do a top-down inventory on the military, the economy, they're focused on other things, so fuck it, we're just gonna attack. They're not gonna be ready for us whatsoever, and we're just gonna take some land, we'll sue for peace, and it'll be fine, right? The international community will be mad at us for a little bit, and they'll get over it, because oil. So, yeah, Saddam, it made a lot of sense, right? So obviously, bringing more Arabs under his direct control leads directly into one of the planks of the Ba'athist Party, which is eliminating foreign control for Arabs. So, you think of that, and I think most people probably think, oh yeah, like puppet states for the West, right? Having the white man ruling over, or basically dominating, whether it's military occupation or economically dominating Arab states, right? It essentially amounts to the same thing. But not only would he be liberating more Arabs, bringing more Arabs from underneath foreign occupation, which in this case would be Persian occupation, gaining more access to the coast, gaining more access to ports, instead of just relying on Basra, having additional ships, shipping, porting, like all of that right there, getting more oil. That's always a big thing. At that point too, like if he had pulled this off, like at this time in the 1980s, if Saddam had been able to pull this off, he probably would have been seen as the preeminent Arab power in the world. So the prestige and the future potentials, right, of something like that, having that accolade under your belt, that's just going to facilitate pan-Arabism even more, where you're going to get more mutual defense pacts, you're going to get more, maybe the Saudis are gonna start, fucking with us a little bit, like in a good way, and you know what, let's we're gonna step in when our Arab brothers are having issues. So if Yemen is having an issue, like, we're gonna be the regional power, right? Our regional ethnic power based on the concepts of pan-Arabism. So there was a lot to gain here from Saddam Hussein to attack Iran, and that just lends itself even more to supporting the logic behind Israel arming Iran, right? Is that Iran's kind of isolated in this. So imagine Saddam being able to unite, like even just like right here in actual like Asia Minor, Levant, like it would be like a repeat of the 6 Day War, right? But it would be substantially more catastrophic, more dangerous. It'd be terrible, right? If they were able to ally, Jordan, probably not, but Syria, yeah. Lebanon, maybe, probably. Egypt. Imagine them declaring war against Israel in the 1980s. That's scary if you're an Israeli. So it really just boils down to pragmatism, right? The enemy of my enemy is maybe not my friend, but he's the guy that I'm going to give a gun to because he's the smaller evil of two evils. And, he might be an issue, 10, 20 years down the road, but I would rather use him now in order to deal with a threat that's maybe only 5 to 10 years down the road. When you are dealing with state power, meaning, nation states, right? When you're dealing with state power, you have to look at it, in my opinion, you have to look at it as a zero-sum game in most regards, where anything that you have, your neighbor doesn't. Anything your neighbor has is something that you don't. And if you can come to amicable terms and trade and, sing Kumbaya, that is the ideal outcome, right? But when you look at the history of conflicts and you look at the history of war between states, it's always rooted in material desire or ideological differences. And I would argue, in most cases of ideological differences leading to war or conflict, ideological or religious differences are the makeup applied over top of material desire, right? Why did the United States invade Iraq? It wasn't because of 9/11, okay? It wasn't because Saddam Hussein was a bad guy. What the fuck did they... It wasn't because they wanted to nation build, right? The U.S. attacked because they wanted fucking oil, right? And the other things might be a part, right? It might be... Like Venezuela is a great current example where you see different arguments going about, well, no, this is all about, securing the back door to the Western Hemisphere. Oh, no, this was all about oil. No, this was all... It's like, well, it's all of them, right? It's all of them. In my mind, looking at it, it is the predominant reason is shutting off access to the hemisphere and shutting off oil and monetary supply to adversarial states like Iran, like Russia, like North Korea, like China, right? So shutting the door basically and locking down the hemisphere. I think that is the predominant reason why the military operation happened earlier this year. That's why we yoinked Maduro. Are we going to get a bunch of oil out of it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's there. Why wouldn't we already? I'm not necessarily advocating or condoning anything, but I'm just saying, if you have already gone through the trouble of, removing a head of state and destabilizing a regime, and there is enormous economic benefit or, oil reserves, right? Why wouldn't you also get that? That's just a bonus, That is a bone on top of locking down the Western Hemisphere from adversarial influence. We are also getting potentially $27 trillion worth of oil reserves. Yeah, no shit. We're gonna capitalize on that. Of course, right? And it's the same reason why, you know, I didn't serve, but I have immense respect for people who did. But it's the same reason why, you know, like, me and my friends were way too, you know, we were 6 to 10 years too young, right, to serve during the Iraq War, like in 2002 to, you know, or Afghanistan for that matter too. But a lot of my friends were youngest siblings or younger siblings, and they had older brothers who did go, right? So, you know, just off the top of my head, I'm like, oh yeah, Philip, Travis, Austin, they all went, right? They were older brothers to people who I was actually friends with. Caleb, another one. And so, you know, we would get the stories that would kind of trickle down, and, oh, he wrote a letter, blah, blah, blah. Because, you know, back then, people actually wrote letters, right? With a pencil and paper. I know that's fucking crazy to imagine in the year of our Lord 2026. But they would write letters, they would describe things, and when they got back, I had direct, like, first-hand accounts that talked about all that they fucking did during their whole deployment was guard truck caravans from the oil fields to Basra. 24, like, they would take shifts, and it would be 24 fucking 7. It would just be, tanker goes, tanker truck fills up with oil, drives down to Basra, offloads onto a fucking ship, goes back to the oil field, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And we're talking like 2-year deployments. And that's what they did. That was their entire tour, was just guarding, you know, making sure that nothing happened. And it wasn't even, at least the ones that I was told about, it wasn't even U.S. service members that were actually operating any of the trucks or any of the you know, the oil equipment, the barrels, the derricks, like any of that. It was all PMCs. It was all non-governmental organization workers, and it was private military contractors that were probably getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to go out in the middle of the fucking desert where it's like 140 degrees and their boots would melt walking, like would stick to the asphalt, like as they're walking across a road. You know, that's how hot it was. And they just went to this butthole of a country, and all they did was load up oil, take it to the port, put it on a boat, go back to the oil field, load up oil, drive it to the fucking port, and put it on a boat for 2 years. So whether that's, you know, the benefit or the added benefit, or if that was the reason, you could argue, right? At least in the case of the Iraq War. But you have to look at it from that standpoint. If there is an advantage to be had, if there is a material to extract, if there is anything you can do to even like minorly hamper, or even just like be clued into, right? So the Snowden stuff, right? That was another big deal with the United States, not necessarily seeking advantages, but trust but verify over our allies, where it was found out like, oh, we kind of spy on everybody. literally, like everybody. And, some people got upset by that. And it's like, you shouldn't be. You should have expected it. And I imagine most of them did. Like, yeah, of course the United States is spying on, or keeping tabs, spying, whatever word you want to use, but of course the United States is looking at the United Kingdom, is looking at Germany and France and whatever, right? That's not the primary focus. I guarantee you extra national intelligence is focused on Russia and China, North Korea, hotspot states that have cropped up over time, where, like 20 years ago it was Iraq and Afghanistan. Nowadays, then after that, it's like, oh, Syria was a big deal, and Egypt during the Arab Spring, we probably, had a lot of intelligence working at that time. And same deal in Syria, at the Arab Spring as well. And then it's like, within the last 10 years, it's shifted probably to, we're keeping an eye on, Yemen, and, checking up on the Red Sea and making sure that trade is going smoothly to the Suez. And we're looking at Iran and Turkey, because Turkey are a bunch of fucking traitorous bastards, according to some people. It's what you have to do, right? You can't just be trusting. You can't just assume that somebody who is on your side, even for the last, 150 years, doesn't mean that they're going to be on your side tomorrow. And that's how nation states, I think, have to look at the world and have to look at each other. Because you never know what's going to happen, right? Things can change very, very rapidly, especially in the day and age of globalism and mass migration and just the rapid demographic changes that can occur. Look at Canada right now. They have a fucking espoused communistic fucking idiot in Carney, who is, he's on the one hand is jerking off communist China, and then on the other hand is trying to say, oh, no, like, no, Trump, we're cool. And it's just like, man, I never thought that I would live to see a time where Canada would even be tangentially viewed as adversarial. You know what I mean? Like, because I grew up in Michigan, and my grandma was French Canadian. We went to Windsor from Detroit. We'd go to Windsor, like, it was like a normal thing. Back then you didn't even need to like show a driver's license. They were like, oh, you're white, you're good. You just drove across the bridge. There was no passport. You just did it. Right? Niagara, same deal. You just go, oh yeah, we just decided we were going to go over to the French side today, fucking Tim Hortons, right? Yeah, that's just what you did. It was fine. And then now it's just like, I don't know. It just seems like it changes so fast. Anyway, so that's why Israel supported Iran during the Iraq-Iran war in the 1980s. Jeez. No, and it was under the radar. It was strategic. It was secret, clandestine. It was not this public support, right? Because that would have been political suicide for any Israeli politician, or even just with Western partners, right? Where, especially during this time, you're very sensitive to, the domino effect, which is typically attributed to communist states, right? That's why the U.S. got involved in Korea. That's why the U.S. got involved in Latin America. That's why the U.S. got involved in Vietnam, right? It was to prevent the domino effect. And, well, it doesn't just have to be to communism. It can also be to radical Islamic regimes, right? So you can't come out and say that that's what you're doing, but it makes perfect sense that that's what you would do, right? It doesn't benefit you to admit to it. Obviously Iran knew, and you're currying favor to a certain degree there as well, where you go, okay, like, it's still a new regime. We don't know exactly like how that's going to shape up to be. Maybe we can maintain some level of influence. Maybe we can maintain diplomatic ties. Like, you just don't know, where it's an unknown quantity. And if it's unknown, but if it turns out to be dangerous, it is much, much further down the road as a threat, as opposed to Iraq, which was a fucking immediate threat, right? And if Iraq had been successful and Hussein had gotten, territorial expansion on top of prestige and everything else, it might have been the rebirth of a fucking caliphate or something, right? Not caliphate's the wrong word, but like a secular equivalent of that, right? Or a more secular, not completely secular. But yeah, Iraq was significantly the bigger danger, so it made sense for Israel to support them, right? Pragmatism and practicality and logic has to rule. You have to do zero-sum calculations, and you have to operate that way. You just do. You have to look at cold calculus, do cost-benefit analysis of, allowing, 4 million people to die in this conflict so that we can save 10 million people from a future conflict that isn't going to happen now because we did the immediate conflict. That's just how it is. And, we can all pretend that we are perfect, moral, logical beings all the fucking time. And, it's never okay to blah, blah, blah. And, you can't look at life like that, man. That's not human. And I wish that wasn't the case. I would say that ideologically, I am certainly utilitarian, influenced by John Stuart Mill. So there's a libertarian base in the sense of classical liberalism, not the joke that the modern day libertarians have become, where they argue for zero gun laws, and they say, well, everything's okay if it's between consenting adults, so incest should be legal. That's why I left a lot of Facebook groups that were libertarian, is because I was like, no, there's a point where logic has to overcome, right? Logic has to overcome ideology. And if that happens, it means that your ideology is not fully sound. So that was my problem with modern day libertarianism. So I would call myself a Millsian utilitarian. I believe that most things benefit people the most when left to their individual choices and maximizing personal liberty to an extent. I think we should have roads. I think we should have social safety nets, like social programs. We should have Medicaid. We should have Social Security. Duh. I think that every single issue needs to be looked at a case-by-case basis, and you look at it and you just ask yourself, what provides the greatest good for the greatest number of people for the greatest period of time? That's it. And so I support social systems and social programs, but I support rigid oversight of said social programs. And if you are found to be defrauding or stealing or misappropriating funds, that should be a capital offense, frankly. And, I've only gotten more extreme in that belief, seeing what's been happening in Minnesota and what I can only imagine is happening in Washington, in Oregon, and New York, and California, right? So, for me, approaching the world from the lens of providing greater good for greater number of people, greater period of time, if I apply that to the state of Israel during that time, the war's happening anyway. It's like 100% that checks out to support Iran over Iraq. 100%. Because they're going to be killing each other no matter what. And if you can tip the scales in one direction or the other, it's better that 100,000 people die in this conflict now, and either they stalemate or Iran wins, or, at least they don't lose, as opposed to the potential of Iraq becoming a hegemonic power in the Levant region and potentially eradicating Israel. So, that was... What was this? Oh, there's another map. That was a lot of yapping. This is for Michael. I don't know if anybody else is going to listen. Michael, sorry I rambled a little bit. I do appreciate you kind of putting me onto this. It's been very... I've been short on time this week, but it has been very fascinating learning more and more about this. Just because, like I said, it's one of those things that, like, you touch on it, like, it happened. Being educated in America on history, it's like, the Iraq-Iran War, then this, then this, then this. And it's like, this is probably what was in my textbook, right? Was like this amount of information. And I just love learning about different periods of history and learning about different weird facets, like Iran and Israel. Like that is such a not fun, but like a unique happening, right? Where like the modern day video, when he's reacting to it and he's just like, that's not a thing that I really expected to say today. And you go, oh, holy shit, like we damn, Israel was supplying arms to Iran? What? Because you look at it from the modern day and you can't help it, and you just go, yeah, Iran, big bad guys, existential threat. And it's like, oh no, we were giving them shitloads of money, intelligence, weapons, like all that stuff. It's fun, and in a lot of ways it's comforting in a way, because when you examine history and you see all the times that people have fallen on different sides of conflict, and you just go, you know what? The enemies of today aren't going to be your enemies forever. They could be the friends of tomorrow, and it just, in my mind, it weakens the sense of rabid nationalism or rabid ethnic superiority or violence or something, right? Because it's like, the like the cartels with Mexico. So, you look at that, you go, oh no, they're an enemy of the United States, blah blah blah, and then you go, well, you know what? If we have some problems, like, they're literally like our closest neighbor and, a big trade partner. And it's like, if China or Russia was getting involved in Latin America, I would 100% be in support of siding with and supporting Mexico. 100%. Because they're in my hemisphere, and I have tons of friends and, old co-workers and everybody else who are Hispanic and have Mexican heritage. And it's just like, no, I vibe with that. Like, I like that, I don't like it as much as I like, being another, bullshit, corn-fed white bread kid from a fucking, 3-stoplight burg in the middle of the Midwest, because that's where I feel at home. But I have a lot more in common with Canadians and Mexicans and, probably even like Cubans, like I don't know that I've ever met in person a Chilean or an Argentinian, but you know what I mean? Like, I feel like I vibe with them a lot more than I would with a lot of African states, Middle Eastern states, probably most Asian states. There's exceptions to that. South Korea, Japan. South Korea is like one of my favorite places ever. Seoul is, if I had to live in a foreign city that I've been to, spent extensive amounts of time in, prior to China resubjugating Hong Kong, it probably would have been Hong Kong, and then a close runner-up would have been Seoul, Korea. And now that, the history happened and time happened the way that it happened, I'd go, yeah, no, definitely Seoul. Definitely Seoul. I don't want to live in Hong Kong anymore. I already lived in China for 5 years. And that was right before it started swinging bad. Like, that was back in the Hu Jintao days. And Xi Jinping has just reversed a lot of practices and policies that made it more free and more accommodating to Westerners. So I wouldn't live there anymore. Anyway, I'm yapping along. I didn't even have a video. I just fucking clicked between like 2 pages. And this is a 57-minute recording. Michael, this is for you. Yeah. I appreciate any other things that you'd like me to go into, talk about, give analysis of. I am physically so tired today. That's kind of why I'm yapping a lot. I'm very sleepy, but this whole week has been kind of rough. So I appreciate you hanging in here this long if you made it this far. And yeah, next one I'm going to do when I'm bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And I will still yap like a motherfucker, but I will probably make more sense. So I appreciate it. Like, honestly, even if you watch it and you don't like it and you drop a dislike, drop a comment. Just tell me where I lost you, or tell me where I could have improved, or like it and tell me where I could have improved, or what you liked the most. Like, I really do feed off of feedback. And so it's hard to just go off of views or likes or dislikes or anything like that. Even if you don't like or dislike it, just drop a comment. Even if it's just a request, like, hey, look into this, or hey, you should check this out. Like, I love going into those rabbit holes. I love doing that. I love learning. I always say that if you're not learning, you're not living. Because you should be learning something new every single day. And if you're not learning something, it's because you're not paying attention. Because there are a million lessons for every single one of us every single day of our lives. And it's not about capturing all of those, it's not about perfection, it's about progress and being a little bit better, a little bit more knowledgeable, a little bit more caring or kind or whatever every single day. Just get a little bit better. That's it. So yeah, with that, I'm gonna fall asleep. I hope I make it to my bed. Probably, I don't know. But yeah, catch you guys later.